Oh, look.
Oh, perfect.
How wonderful is that? Yeah, I'm pretty happy about that, so thank you. Somebody remind me like tomorrow to delete McAfee off my computer. All right, so idle mixture adjustment. Oh, what a great thing to actually start with. There are two things that let me see. There's three things you can do to a carburetor as an A&P that you will do often. One of them is install it.
Okay. Yes.
And there is a lot to be said to installing. That is actually it's a huge task, and there's a lot of responsibility because if you screw that up, it's bad. You only have one carburetor. There's no redundancy, as much as I wish there was. And sometimes the linkages break or come undone, slip. There's some ADs on the Marvel Shubblers on those arms slipping, and you're getting into that. I took off with my daughter Mari in our 150 off of a Lodi airport, not the one I'm at now, but a different one. Not that it matters, because that's what you do when you get old. You start talking about details that have no bearing to anything about, And it was one of the lovely days. It was like 78 or 76. I don't know, but, it's like that.
Kind of rainy, kind of cloudy.
Yeah, anyway, at the end of the runway, it's nice. That if you have to make an emergency landing, it's great, because there's all kind of grape vineyards you can just crash into. And we took off, and I had an instant. I mean, we got about 200-300 feet, and I lost 200 RPM just like that. Man, the poo will come out. Let me tell you, you're like, oh, and you don't know what's going to happen next. It's like, she doesn't know, thankfully, but but I'm like, this is not, there's nowhere, and you can't turn around and go back. I mean, you can, but you got to climb anyway. And so I climbed out. I'm like, kind of trying to assess this. It's running fine now, but I lost 200 RPM instantly. And so, you go through all your troubleshooting. And when you talk about troubleshooting, I'm really getting off the track here, but you break it down to, there's just a couple things. Mechanical, fuel, air, spark.
Yep.
That's just it. So do I have a mechanical problem? Well, what would cause something to suddenly lose 200 RPM but still run smooth and fine?
Nothing.
And I'm like, well, there's nothing mechanical, and it's just, it would run rough. If it's a cylinder, it's going to run rough. I can't think of anything.
Hear it.
Well, RPM, okay, I could have lost a mag, and I got high enough altitude. I went over, I did a mag check. No, both mags are running fine. So, okay, spark is fine. So let's talk about fuel and air. So, did I lose just part of my fuel? No, it's running fine. It's not rich. It's not lean. It's perfectly, running fine. So, air. If I would, did I lose some air?
You sucked something in?
Thought maybe, something like that. Ended up being a carb heat. Carb heat cable broke.
Oh.
And so that little flapper valve went from cold air to carb heat. And that's what you do. Yeah, hot air is being adjusted. You can lose 200 RPM right there. Boom. So,
Volumetric efficiency.
yeah. So, the carburetors run a little rich, actually, at that point, because the air is hot. So, figured it out. Thought, okay, do that. Flew to SAC. Good. Okay, so yeah, three things you can do. Put it on. You can adjust the idle mixture and the idle speed. I think, let me see. I've already covered idle speed. How do we adjust the idle speed?
Stop screw.
It's a stop screw. All it does is it opens the butterfly a little bit or closes it a little bit. If you want it to go faster, you
Open
the butterfly. If you want it to close, you close it. Okay, ask again. How do we adjust idle speed?
Stop screw.
What else?
The richness.
That's it.
I mean,
That's it. One screw. I really want you guys to get this because I feel like some people in here haven't got it yet. Just the idle. I feel bad now. Just the idle speed. You adjust the
stop screw.
idle speed screw. What about the mixture?
No.
Might as well work on the tail light assembly, all right? Because it's a different system. Well, it's a little bit out there, but I'm trying to make a point. If I'm idling, I'm in my airplane and I'm idling at, say, 550 RPM. And I decide that I want to idle a little bit faster, so I reach over and I push in my throttle a little bit. Did my airplane suddenly get rich or lean?
Nope. Just got faster.
Just got faster. So when I advanced the throttle, I didn't need to get out and adjust the mixture, right?
No.
Okay, so everybody follows me. If you want the carburetor to go idle a little faster, you don't have to screw with the idle mixture adjustment. Got it? Okay. What about the idle mixture adjustment? What does that adjust?
The mixture of idle.
The mixture of idle. Yeah. Because the way it's made, they allow you, the mechanics, to, if you want it to run a little bit richer, you can. Want it to run a little bit leaner, you can. Right? So you can do it. Now, maybe this is where you're getting confused, is once I set the carburetor and say, okay, I want this to idle at exactly 600 RPM. Everything else is fine, so I adjust the idle screw. I'm like, there it is, 600 RPM. It's running fine. But now, if I go around and screw with the idle mixture, it will screw with the RPM. That's not how you adjust RPM,
No.
right? It's almost like saying, if it's idling too fast, I'll just cut some of the ignition leads off so that only some of the cylinders are working.
Makes sense.
Right? It works, doesn't it? You could slow the idle down by cutting some of the ignition leads. I could slow the aircraft idle down by making it so rich it barely runs. Right? Okay, so but don't confuse that. That's a bad thing, right?
Yep.
So idle mixture, when I get all done setting the idle speed per se, now I want to know, hey, by the way, how's my mixture going here? Now, we don't talk about this off idle because there is no adjustment in the off idle. It's done by an engineer and people with the main metering jet. They set the main metering jet and that's it. If you want it to run richer or leaner off idle, you change out the main metering jet. Now, granted, we have a control also to do it. That's for going up in altitude. But if I'm at sea level and my carburetor is full rich, because the knob's all the way in, and I run it all the way up, high RPM, like, wow, that's just too rich. What do? Yeah, you would change out the main metering jet. However, that's not an authorized thing for us to do. You'd have to look in the manual. If it said, if it runs too rich at wide open throttle, then you change out. That's not in there. They say if you've got this airplane with this engine and this, then you should have this carburetor, and this carburetor should have this main metering jet. That's the end of the story, right? So they don't run too rich. They run fine. Okay. But go back to idle. They say, well, we're going to give you we'll trust you to adjust the idle mixture. So only at idle. So the real procedure, and I hope I don't confuse you on this one, the way I do it out in the field is the first thing is, because adjusting the mixture can increase or decrease your RPM, I like to adjust the idle mix first. So I actually back the idle speed. So this is setting up a brand new engine in an airplane. I'll actually back out the idle speed screw with the engine off. I'll just go and just back it out. Let's get out of my way. I don't want it. All right, then I'll get in the airplane, I'll run it up, I'll warm it, and then I'll put the throttle exactly where I want it to be and lock it in. There's a little lock inside it for your pilot. You can lock it. It's locked and it's perfect, and I love the way it is. Now, if I grabbed the knob and pulled it back, it would go too slow and die, right? But I didn't. I set it as a pilot, I set it exactly where I want it. I shut off the engine, and I go out, and I turn that little screw in until it just touches the little stop, just a peck, just like
Kissing your
kissing
sister.
your sister. That's right. So now that's set. And then, well, also when I'm in the airplane running it up and I set it exactly where I want it, I also reach over and I pull the idle mixture, the manual mixture all the way out. And what I'm looking for is I want to see the RPM go up a little and then die. Just a little bit, right? 25, 50 RPM, up, then die. That tells me that I'm rich of, yeah, not peak EGT, just
Peak
rich
RPM.
of peak RPM. So I'm a little rich. And why do I want it a little bit rich? I don't know, that's what they tell me to do. Some people are going to say it's for cooling, fine, whatever. Some people are going to say it's for starting, hey, whatever you think. Book tells me what it's got to be, that's what it's got to be. All right, follow? And if I pulled it back out and it's at 700, it just bop. What's my problem?
Too lean.
You're lean.
Too lean. So I shut off the engine, I get out, and I'm reaching for the idle mixture screw, and I'm gonna
Screw it out. Richen it.
back it out a little bit, a little more fuel flow through. and I get back in the airplane and start it up, and I bring the throttle up, got to clear it, pull it back out, set it where I want it, try the RPM again. This time it, goes 100 RPM and dies.
100 RPM.
It's too rich now, went too far. Lean it out just a little bit. All right, trial and error. Usually have somebody in the cockpit doing it while I'm outside or something like that. All right, follow. So idle mixture adjustment. Let's see.
Is that the carb monkey you were talking about?
That's me, the carb monkey. Used to quickly, hopefully, and easily, and it should be, easily adjust the idle mixture. All right, so again, I like to set the idle mix perfect, then I set the speed, because you could have a little bit of effect. If I'm adjusting the idle mixture and somebody had it super rich, I mean, when I pulled back on the mixture, it went up like 200-300 RPM and died. Right? It could happen, right? When I go in there and I start leaning it out, I'm going to be taking it from this super rich condition to best power. Even though it's idle, they're still super rich and best power and lean at best power. And as I do that, what's the RPM going to do?
Again.
It's going to be coming up until it's higher. Now, I'm not adjusting idle speed. I was just adjusting mixture. It was so far out of whack that the engine happened to speed up because I actually got it where it should be. That's why I don't set idle speed first. I set the mixture first. Remember, on a Stromberg, you can't do this. Why can't you do this on a Stromberg? I can't pull back the idle mix and watch my rise. There you go. It's a different system. Can't do it. So I got a Stromberg. I pull the mixture out. What am I going to see?
Nothing.
Watch your watch go around for the rest of your life because this is going to wait till you run out of gas in the gas tank. Right? Nothing. So how do I know if a Stromberg is set correctly?
Running it.
Just run it. What am I looking for?
Roughness.
What?
A roughness.
Yeah. If it
Runs rough, yeah.
got me choked up. If it runs rough, we got a problem. If it runs smooth and accelerates, I'm done.
Good.
Right? That's how it is out in the field. Remember, here you can mess with it a little bit. And you should be able to watch your manifold. Is really the one to watch. Manifold as you just leave the throttle alone and adjust the mixture. You should see the manifold pressure start moving back and forth. Right? When you get to best power, the manifold will be at its lowest, and then you can enrich in it and watch it get a little bit worse. Okay, hopefully you got that. All right. The idle mix. Idle mix is set. Richer than, I have stoichiometric here, but that's not the word I want. I'm going to put best power. Best power. That is, oops, I'll make that an I. One theory is for additional cooling at idle. I think that's
Get barely any fuel out of it.
not accurate. Better theory is that extra fuel is for starting because there is no choke. ABC procedure. All right, how are we going to do this? I don't know what I wrote. Let's see. Set idle speed. And you can do it this way. You just may have to readjust the idle speed later. Set idle speed and adjust mixture 1 1/2 turns out. Be gentle when you screw it in. All right. Pull idle cutoff. And engine should have a, I'm going to say 25 to 50 RPM rise, then die. I found out I got to write that. And that's really more for the, and that's a very abbreviated way of putting it, and that's really for the Marvel Shovelers. If you got a Stromberg and you pull the idle cutoff out, what happens? Nothing, because it's not called an idle cutoff. It's called a mixture. All right, I think that's all I can say. Well, I can say a lot more about that. That's all I'm going to say right now. Yeah, it's way out here. E.
Oh.
Because like
I see.
that was D was idle circuit, I think. Yeah. Accelerating circuit system. All right. Carburetors have an accelerating system so that when you advance the throttle, the plate is opening up, in theory, I guess, faster than the air is being sucked into it. So you're going to run lean. And if you run lean, that's going to slow down the burn. All kinds of bad things happen. We talked about that. So we want to enrich it for acceleration and then let the carburetor catch up. So you're going to look for an accelerating system. And I think all carburetors probably have an accelerating system. I guess I wrote that. Nice way of. So we'll put all, probably all I know, carburetors, carbs, need some way to facilitate rapid throttle openings. As a mechanic, we should never do rapid throttle movements. Never jazz the throttle. You know, we do it in cars. I do it in my car all the time. You guys hear it? Huh?
Wait.
I know. Katie and I went somewhere and we had to pay to get out, and the lady wasn't paying attention, and I'm like rolling up on her. She's like, "Oh, geez, I didn't hear you." I'm like, "Well, I was revving the engine." It's just like, she didn't get it. Okay.
She didn't think it was that.
No, she didn't. So as mechanics, we should never, very gentle all the way, gentle back. As mechanics, boy, other mechanics are listening to you. And if you're jazzing the throttle, you're going to hear about it. We do it very gentle and very slow. And as a pilot, we should be doing the same thing. But it's one thing to say that, it's another to do that. You're coming in on final, and you're getting ready to flare, and a deer runs out on the runway. Guess what? I'm not going to go. Oh, man, I'm going to jam that thing forward so fast. You know, I'm going to dent the instrument panel probably, and then poo's going to come out. And so, you know, you got to think about this. So there's got to be some way to accelerate. So they do have an accelerating system. There are basically two systems. There are two types of systems. Those that work and those that don't. No. Type 1 is the accelerating well. Accelerating well system. So the Stromberg, that has an accelerating well system. When we're on the idle circuit, there happens to be fuel that fills up right here, the discharge nozzle, and it just sits there. Where there's normally air and fuel, or when it's running out, it's filled this whole system up. It's kind of filled up part of the air bleed too. I believe it comes all the way in here into this air bleed and kind of rides all the way up into here. I think it's quite a bit. And so when I accelerate, it's just going to have to draw all that fuel out first, right? It's going to fuel and air at the same time. And so there we go, an accelerating well. Marvel Shoveler does the same thing with some of their carburetors. So simply a reservoir of extra fuel between the main metering jet and discharge nozzle. So simply simply a reservoir of fuel. Reservoir of fuel between the main. I'm just gonna put simply reservoir of fuel because we're running out of time. Let's see. Extra fuel is drawn out when throttle is opened. Extra fuel is drawn out when throttle is opened. And, yeah.
I do have a question. On the well system, when it's going through the main air bleed,
Yeah.
when it's getting pushed out, does it still like emulsify the air?
I was thinking the same thing as I was talking about it. Where would the air come from? And it doesn't seem like it would originally.
No.
It
Or
seems
is
like
just
it
so
would be-
fast it just throws it up and just enriches it.
I think that's what happens is it has a bunch that comes out and then the air follows through and then it just kind of works.
Because when we looked at the well system in the book, that one made more sense. There was like a separate chamber attached to the side of it, like as if it would get drained out. I mean, that would make sense. But I can't really wrap my head around the other one.
It's just the discharge nozzle where it normally is emulsified fuel running through it. It's just been sitting there for a long time. Just sitting there, doing nothing. And
Not a normal operation.
well, it's waiting. Then you open the throttle and then it starts to flow out. Now it's this emulsified fuel and air going through.
Where's the fuel coming from before that? Is
But
it
it's
still
basically.
It's what's
spewing out, or is
It's
it?
sitting right here. That's just
If
Well,
it's
I
sitting-
let's see.
I guess what I'm saying is that initial fuel emulsified, or is that just like?
I don't think it is. That's just my opinion because I can't see how it would be.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's nothing in here to indicate that. If we look at this and we take all this pink right here and we figure this is all just red fuel sitting here that's stagnant. All right, so first of all, pink represents metered fuel, so it is past the metering jet, so it is metered, but it's just sitting there stagnant. And you know that the air has to come through this point right here, down and in. All right, but if the fuel is stagnant, it's going to come up to the bottom of this nozzle, and it's also going to fill this up, and it's going to come up and fill this up to here. That's just a fact.
Yeah.
And so, the way I see it, I mean, I could be wrong.
Follow
Are
the
there-
science.
Wouldn't be the first time today.
Are there different kind of well systems?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. So
I don't know them all, but
Okay. I just want to make sure what I'm looking at is.
they're different type, but it's all about the same thing.
Well, because the one I saw, it comes off and there's literally a separate chamber apart from the main air bleed.
Yes, there can
So
be
it looks
some
like
with
that
separate.
It would aerate
Let me see.
well, because I don't know.
Got to go through all this tonight.
This one Monday.
I don't know. That's going to put us behind on the next day.
Next test on Tuesday.
All right. Well, we'll come back. So, yes, there's different types. I don't know them all.
All right.
But I'm talking about the Stromberg. I see it as not emulsified.
Okay.
But I also see it as not a whole lot of fuel either. What's the other type? Two types. I don't want that. Two. No, two. What do I want? Two types. One, accelerating. Two, accelerating pump. Accelerating pump. So it's a positive displacement pump that injects fuel through a separate discharge nozzle. So it's a positive displacement.
Thank you.
Positive displacement pump. Hand-driven pump, really. That injects fuel. That injects fuel through a separate discharge nozzle. Separate discharge nozzle. So that means when the pump goes down, it is going to push fuel out. Let's see. I'm going to write this. I don't agree with it in total. If the throttle is opened slowly, and so in other words, you open it really slow, you don't necessarily want the accelerator pump to be pumping. Some books say if throttle is opened slowly, fuel is bypassed around the plunger.
That's enough time to move out of the way.
So to me, that's like, right? So you guys got your kit for heroin,
Yeah.
and so you have the syringe, and it's like saying if you inject it really, okay, so you're going to get your flu shot.
Your
And
COVID vaccine.
yes, and the nurses, and they draw it out of the syringe. It's like saying, well, don't put it in slow because it's going to go around the plunger and not the bottom. It doesn't. The plunger is sealed against the tube. And so is the accelerator pumps. It's got a leather packing with a spring in it that pushes it out. I don't see how it gets around that, but
Everybody does.
okay. Oh, this is one of my test questions. Can be used to prime the engine if you are careful. If you're not, it can be used to start a fire. So it depends on how you do it. So like I said, when you have this type of system and fuel is in the carburetor, when you advance the throttle, there is a plunger that when you have it in idle, it is up. And as you go forward, it pushes down through check valves and pushes it out a different nozzle. It will go. And so the engine's off, nothing's running, and you do that, it sprays it right up, hits the top of the intake, and then falls down the carburetor into the airbox. And then if you have any sort of backfire, it will light it on fire and you'll have a fire in your airbox.
Airbox blows up.
And the airbox is how much? Huh? Yeah, $3,000 to $4,000 for the one on my plane. So I probably have a cheap one. All right, so, but you can. And the way I do it is while I'm cranking, if the engine doesn't catch, I will give it a quick burst and right back. Don't go firewall it and see what happens, because when it starts, it's going to, just screw it. All right, that's probably not in the POH, so, All right. Well, thankfully, we've covered a lot of this. I think I can go kind of fast. Economizer system, also known as, that's AKA, power enrichment. And I put regardless of the name. Regardless of the name. I guess I can scroll up. It enriches the mixture above cruise settings. Why? Why do you want a richer mixture?
So you don't detonate.
Detonation.
Changes your power
Yep.
for your performance numbers.
It keeps mixture at cruise setting, keeps mix at cruise settings from being too rich. And adds extra fuel at high power settings. It's kind of a different way of saying it. Let me see. I think we have 5 types here. I wrote 4 and then across that I put 5. So let's try that 5 types. 5 types. Let's take a look at the pictures here. Economizer. There we go. This is a needle type. And what you have to do is simply just dissect what's going on. Dissect, yeah, that's a word. What's going on here. So let's take a look at what's happening here. The needle type. All right, so main discharge nozzle. Air comes through. What is this little guy right here?
Bleed air.
Bleed air, because it's behind the venturi. So there we go. Some of this is. All right.
That looks like bleed air too.
Yeah. This is just a mixture control. I'm talking
I
about
was
it.
gonna say, that's
That's just
yeah.
mixture control. So basically what it is, yeah, this is like, we were talking mixture controls. So it's just a valve. So this, I believe this is supposed to be the power jet or the main metering jet, same term, all right, same thing, different term. And so under normal circumstances, this does the metering, but as you mixture and you go leaner, it is going to narrow this down. So this is narrower than this, and then this becomes the main metering jet. So, but I didn't want to talk mixtures. I wanted to talk, this is mixture. Did we already talk mixtures? Let me see. Manifold, back second. No, we haven't talked mixtures. I just need to go backwards further. That's my problem. Please stand by. Mixture, economizer. There's the word. All right, needle. I says needle was the word I was looking for, and I saw that. All right, so this is an economizer system. Remember the terms I gave you: economizer, power enrichment. So for our purposes, an economizer is something that takes an otherwise rich carburetor and leans it out during cruise. We'll call that an economizer. And a power enrichment is something that takes an otherwise somewhat lean carburetor and adds fuel. Follow? Hey, everybody, so that's the word, we're using that. Your textbooks and other publications, they're not going to talk that way. So they call this an economizer system. But how does it work? As the throttle is advanced, automatically this needle comes up. So under normal circumstances, here's our float. Here's the main metering jet. It comes through here and out. This is completely closed off. But at higher power settings, it will lift this needle up and allow fuel to come through a parallel economizer metering jet, adding more fuel. So we would call that a
Power enrichment.
power enrichment. You got it. Because it add more fuel. All right, so needle type. What else? Yeah.
So, how does that make it go up? Is it by a vacuum or?
No, this is linkage.
Okay, so it's linked to the butterfly valve.
Yep.
Okay.
It may not be linked like they're showing it, like it actually is a 1-to-1 ratio.
Right.
It could be at the very end of the travel, it will engage and then pop up, just a little bit.
Okay.
When I say it may be, it is. All right, another type. What is this one? This is the piston type. This is the common one. Sort of. They don't normally look like this. This is like a double piston type. I don't know where I got that. It has 2 pistons. Let's see. This even has a different jet over here. So under normal circumstances, fuel is going to flow through here, through the main metering jet, up and out. As the throttle is advanced, it opens up this passageway right here, so it provides a parallel path for fuel to go. So 2 paths now, which is old time. We're not even going to work on one like this. So that is, what would we call that?
Piston type.
Is it economizer or power enrichment? Power enrichment, because it added fuel. What do we got here? Pressure operated economizer system. Oh, this one's kind of fun. So it's the same thing, sort of. So what do we have here? We'll have to kind of dissect it a little bit. So we've got parallel openings, which we've been looking at, but it's operated by some sort of manifold pressure. So this is going to be connected to the manifold. And so take a look at this. We got a spring, a fulcrum, and a dash pot. Dash pot is something that's like a shock absorber. All right. So here's our fulcrum, and here is our evacuated bellows. So an evacuated bellows, you guys know what a bellows is? Okay, you know the bendy straws? Okay, the little bendy part?
Oh,
Okay, so if we just had the little bendy part, how it expands and contracts, like a little accordion, okay. So imagine something like that, but made out of metal, thin metal. And it's completely sealed. All right, follow me? Okay, top, bottom, it's completely sealed. Now, if I take that and I go way up in the mountains, like a potato chip bag, what's it going to do?
Expand.
Aren't you going to take potato chips to the mountains? All right, so you guys, just so we know, get a bag of Ruffles, right? You buy them down here in the valley, and you go up to the mountains. When you get up there, the bag is like this big, right? Still only has 8 chips in it, but it's like this big.
Works well with water bottles too.
Water bottles too. Oh yeah. So when I go flying, sometimes you hear this loud bang. It's like water bottles. You'll squeeze it or something when you're drinking out of it, and then you go up in altitude, and that thing just starts expanding way out. All right. Yeah. I took my son when he was a little guy. We went to the Reno Air Races. You guys go to the Reno Air Races?
Not yet.
It's an experience. It's nothing like it used to be when they'd go right next to the stands until they killed a bunch of people. But it's an exciting thing to do. So he's a little guy. We go up there, he's this little guy. Get him up in the stands, and we sit down, and I'm going to be a good dad, and I'm going to get out the sunscreen, and I popped it open, and I sunscreened the entire crowd. I was just... I need that back for my son. All right, so say that to say low pressures will cause that bellows to expand, okay? So at idle is low pressure, so at idle, this will expand, and what is that going to do? Since this is the fulcrum, it's going to go up, it's going to close that. All right, so it's closed at idle. Now, as I advance my throttle, my manifold pressure goes up, 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 till it gets almost to atmospheric, and this will be calibrated at some point that it would start, did I say that right? Yeah, the pressure will start collapsing it. And as it collapses it, so first it's going to collapse it a little bit and have a little leak. And then the more I advance it, the more it's going to go down. Till it's all the way down at the bottom, and it's got a, and now it has 2 paths for fuel, and so that's going to be power enrichment. Yep. And the spring helps it. All right.
Yeah, there's a spring. Whatever.
And the spring, and it helps it. Let's see. Okay, this is the other type, which, geez, I didn't have a picture of it. This is what you're going to work with. This is the normal type. This is your, so it's got a plunger on a spring, and this is connected directly to the throttle. So as I move the throttle forward, it's going to push that down. Pull the throttle back, it goes up. It's almost on a 1-to-1 thing. You got the throttle in the middle, it's in the middle. And so when I pull back to idle, it goes up, and it's a plunger, just like a flue shot. And so it goes up, and it draws the fuel out of the fuel chamber through here, through a little check, that's a little ball right there that moves out of the way, fills this all the way up, and it just sits there. Sit there for infinity while I'm idling. And when I push the throttle forward, it pushes it down. Can't go this way because of the check valve, but it pushes that off the seat. Can you see that right there?
Yeah.
All right, get used to seeing that. That's a little plate with a spring. Means it's a check valve. Fuel only goes one way. If it tries to go this way, it forces it closed even more. So fuel comes out, pushes through this way, comes around, and goes out the another little discharge nozzle just sitting there and sprays it up in your face. All right. There is a spring on here because if I told you the other day, if I jam the throttle forward, the throttle would really only move as fast as this would let it. But with having a spring, now I can jam the throttle forward, and this will shoot up here instead, and then the spring will push the fuel out. So there we go. So we have the needle type. All right, 4 types. We have the needle type. So I really don't think I have time to write like all the details. As the throttle is open, the second jet is open, allowing more fuel to discharge the nozzle. These are really kind of rare types. I've never even worked on a carburetor, I think, that has one. We had the piston type.
That was that first one that we saw?
Yep. Piston type. Let me see. I could do this. Needle type opens a second jet. How's that? The piston type uses double piston, and it also opened a second jet, right? Double piston opens second jet. We had the manifold pressure type. What did that do? As manifold increases, so as MAP, that's a term, MAP, manifold absolute pressure. So as MAP, manifold pressure, increases, a sealed bellows collapses, sealed bellows. Make sure I had that right. Oops, there we go. There. As manifold pressure increases, the bellows collapses and allows a second valve to open. That is correct.
What is that little dash pod?
Oh, okay. So it's, like I said, it's a little shock absorber.
Okay.
And so you see stuff like this around aircraft a lot. And usually what it is, it's like usually a fluid-filled thing, and this has to move. This arm has a little plate has to move through the fluid. You know, the easiest way to make something like that really would be to, and this would make sense. Okay. Like if I had a tube, and I filled the whole thing full of fluid, and I put a disc in there with an O-ring, and attach that to a shaft. And so this is all full of fluid. The whole thing is full of fluid.
Yeah.
And then you put a small passageway through. And the only way that thing can move down is the fluid has to make its way through this little passage. We go out, and if you go the other way, then it's got to go this way.
It's kind of like that accelerator pump.
Yeah. Yep. But it's gonna cause it to move slow. So something like that. All right, sealed bellows. Where was I going to put? Sealed bellows collapses. Collapses and allows a second valve to open. And allows a second. We'll put second jet or second passage to open. And number 4.
Plunger.
Yeah, plunger type. I have in here the back suction type. I should have a picture of that.
That's why there's 5. Then.
Yeah.
Back suction.
Piston and plunger aren't the same thing?
Yeah. No, well, this is the piston. Double piston. Double
Oh.
piston.
I guess that was in the back.
Hang on. Pretty sure I had a picture of it. Maybe not. Ah, won't worry about it. How's that sound? It's like an old-timey, like antiquated. What a back and cruise power vacuum is applied to the float ball. Oh, shoot, no.
Excellent.
Jeez. All right, this is a big one. This is actually
On the shoulder.
this is important. Hello. Yes, back suction type.
It's the one on the shoulder.
No, it's not.
No, it's
That's the mixture control.
That's a mixture control, but it does work off a back suction type mixture control. So some carburetors are set up so that during cruise, there is a passage that does go from the throttle body area over to the fuel bowl. That is probably why. Go away. That is why I have this picture here, probably. There we go. That's why this is here. There's a point to this. That's why that's there, and this one is next. All right. It was not a series. Right here. Laser. It's not colored, but you can see it, atmospheric bowl vent back suction economizer. Now, I don't necessarily agree with how they drew this, but
I can barely even see it. Too many arrows.
Too many arrows.
So many arrows in this class.
I know. I didn't draw them all.
17,000 arrows.
Okay.
Go
The
to
back section's got 4 arrows.
quarter of
in it.
Well, let me tell you what's going on here. I can't color at the same time. Right here is a passageway that goes into the throttle body. Throttle body is another way of saying the throat of the carburetor where the air is going through. All right. So this right here, you can see the dashed line. This is closed and it's an idle. And I don't know about this drawing. Yeah, this is going to come down. This one's going to come down, and this side's going to go up.
Yep.
Although I think that's kind of drawn to go down, but whatever. At some point, this I know, at some point, this is how I see it, because there's really not a lot of information. The throttle valve will sort of aim at this right here. All right. Now, if I aim it right at that, I create this pinch point right here. And if I create sort of a pinch point, there's a little gap right there. But what's happening to the airflow between that throttle plate and that hole? It's going to increase velocity as it goes through that space. And what's it going to do? Decrease pressure. So if I have a suction on here and create a bit of a suction in here that goes through here into the float bowl, what happens?
Pressure difference.
What's it doing to my...
Actually, it pulls the pressure, not the fuel. It would change the pressure.
Yeah.
in the bowl.
Decreases the pressure a little bit in that float bowl. Not a lot, but enough so that it makes it a little bit harder for the fuel to come out of the discharge nozzle. All right. So, but that's if you look at one and you're trying to figure out how it works. This is all I did, and I could surmise that, and I could see that plate was aimed right at that hole at about 60-70% power. Now, well, that's interesting. And then after that, it opens up and goes past it. Well, two things are going to happen, I think. That number one, you lose that Venturi effect between the throttle plate and that hole.
Mm-hmm.
Also, when the throttle plate opens, overall the manifold pressure goes back up.
Mm-hmm.
And so when the manifold pressure goes back up, then this back suction is going to get more pressure, which is then going to, it's, in conjunction with the discharge nozzle, they sort of equalize, negating the whole back suction. Follow?
Yep.
So that's what you're looking for on the back suction. It's just some way that this hole drilled here gets a suction during cruise RPM that causes a decrease in the pressure here, which automatically leans out the carburetor during that time. Yeah.
Now, on our carburetor, the one we just got, the Marvel, it has that passage, but we're trying to look and find that passage at the top. And there's
Do you have one with an accelerator or without?
with an accelerator?
There are, so what you're going to discover that some of these are drilled to do something on one half and not drilled on the bottom. I have even gotten so far as I have found on carburetors that are blanked off, or if you dig far enough, I'll find jets up in here. Brass jets that have been installed that go to nothing.
Ours is brass up in there. I wonder if that's...
There's a vent, there's a little screen right here, and you have to pop the screen out, and you can look in there. So, doesn't necessarily have to have it. I'm not saying that all carburetors even have this. I'm saying I've noticed some do. I've noticed some don't.
It's like everything you've described ours has except that top
Yeah,
hole.
it wasn't drilled, so they doesn't have it.
They drilled everything else
Mhm.
except that. Why?
Yeah, that's just
It's like
that
you
is what
went
it is.
so far and then just stopped.
all right. I know what time it is, so just hang on. We'll finish this off. So the back suction type. Let me see. Let's see. In cruise power. A vacuum is, or a low pressure is applied to the float bowl. How's that work? And then 5 was the plunger type. Thank you. Plunger type. Discharges to a second, or separate's a better word. Separate nozzle. Just a squirt. Oh, I actually have one more here.
6.
Yeah, what do you know? Because I keep adding them. That air bleed type. Air bleed type. What do I have to say about that? Larger Marvel Shubler carbs used a needle valve that is controlled by the throttle. Full throttle, the needle valve is closed, which enriches the mixture, closing off bleed air. Oh, yeah. All right. Well, I'll give you guys a break. We'll come back to that one.